this. Worked all your life, you have this, you still got the nest egg a little bit, you get sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? And so all that gets spiraled out and that is taken care of a little bit. And now you become food insecure, you become housing insecure, et cetera, et cetera. Even if you own your own home, the bottom line is you've got to borrow against that home. So now you're back to zero.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is what people don't get. The other part of that is when you're talking about the businesses. I've said this from the day I've stepped onto console. Unless people in the community can support the businesses can't survive. It's got to be a combination of the community itself as a whole, right? As a whole, and that means going back to your point. Yes, you need to put in some of the retail and or restaurants that are a little bit more affordable. I get that, but even at that, if I'm making $75,000 a year, I have 3 kids, I'm worried about food on the table and clothes on their back and getting them to school. I am not worried about if I'm going to go to a restaurant and go to a store to buy this, and this, right? We do know, because I work in advertising, I do know that the Latin community is very family-centric and kid-centric. So that means that they spend the money on education and things like that, the computers, et cetera, et cetera. And they're judged by that. On that, because then we will hear people say, well, they can afford a phone, they can afford a computer. No, that's not the point. They're making their kids better than they have. And this is the other part. But I'm going to just go back to this. Because I sit on FCP a bit, and I listen to the business owners, and I listen to the landlords, and and I'm like, okay, but do you guys understand that in order to make this really, really profitable, we do, and I know this is a bad word in certain people's mind, you do need density. You have to bring housing here. You have to, it could be a tent with a roof on it. It has to be in here because the bottom line, unless you introduce more housing, you're in the same boat. We cannot, what I get tired of hearing, and this is no push to anybody. What I get tired of hearing is, we've been here and we want it like this and we want it like this. But that day we left when you allowed it to get like this, right? So the point of it is, because it's just a part of life, right? It's ebbs and flows, ebbs and flows. You could be really high. Look at all the cities that went like this, and now they're coming up like this. That's just the way.
So let me give you a couple things here. One is let's talk about younger folks. Let's talk about what we know for people's choices in housing. This is some of the stuff that people. These things are these are things that people know, right? The younger folks who are making housing choices want amenity-rich communities that are walkable. They take sustainability seriously and affordability. And I have to say this, and it's not because I'm a college professor, but millennials are burdened with student loan debt in a way that
nobody else can.
They cannot have the down payment to buy a house. They have to be talking about rent, and that's fine. Listen, my oldest is 26. We had a conversation a couple weeks back when he was visiting, and he's like, how you think I'm ever going to buy a house? And he doesn't actually have that much debt, and he's got a pretty good job. He lives in the city. He's doing fine, but he's like, no one. The folks who are Noah's technically on the cusp. He was born in '99. He's an old soul. He's more millennial than Gen Z or whatever. So it's fine, but the folks who are in that squarely in the millennial generation, who are burdened with debt, who are looking at these, like you're saying, like they're looking at the economics. They morally and ethically don't want to shop at Walmart, but they also know that the cheapest groceries are in Walmart. That's a bigger food systems problem. You can have that lecture too. They are looking at, I would love to go to Matt's Red Rooster. Matt's a great guy, great local business, supports everyone else. It's a special occasion because really, truly, if I'm looking at my budget, I'm making choices. I'm going to pull out the circular. I'm going to say that the zucchini is cheaper at Aldi, and then I'm going to go shop there. Right? Yeah. So that's
the game,
right? And so if we're talking about the next generation of homeowners, we're talking about people who are between, say, late 20s through 40. Right? We're talking about that generation of folks who are not yet homeowners. They do not have the generational grandma, here's $50,000 they are, owning is not anything, they're not looking at their house as the way towards savings towards retirement. They may have a Robinhood account, they may have crypto, they may have investments in a 401k for work, right? They may have savings, but they're not seeing their house as a mechanism for saving. So the idea that that we should be building housing that is targeted for that kind of customer alone is missing secular market.
Yeah, I agree.
Not that those folks aren't there, they're absolutely, right? And so we have to build, it's a yes and, right? It's a yes and. So it's so folks who don't have that same connection to property, right? They don't want anything. Like, and again, this is a very quirky notion. Before the post-World War II Levittown development, the majority of people in this country did not own their house. Right? Historically, ownership was you had land if you were a farmer, right? You had land. Housing, if you lived in a town or a city, majority, it did not flip until after World War II, the majority of the US population owned a home. Or was, paying on it. Them in the bank owned a home, right? Land, again, and the reason why a lot of people own land, especially in the western half of the country, was because it was stolen and then given to them under all sorts of, acts of, all the federal lands program that gave homestead and all the rest of it. Like those were, they paid a few dollars an acre for it, but like, okay, so yes, acknowledging that too. Until really the big boom in home ownership did not happen until the GI Bill and home ownership loan programs came out of the New Deal. Most people did not want to own. Right. The idea that your home is your investment vehicle to save towards retirement, it's a 70-year thing, but it is not a 250-year length of U.S. history. Nor is it, if you look around the rest of the world, owning a home. Like there are all sorts of countries around the world we think might be doing pretty well. Home ownership is not a be all and end all. It's not the expectation.
Exactly. Places in Europe they care less.
Yeah. And so and that's again, and I think that what the younger folks are realizing is we've got a lot of debt, my finance is limited. I'm choosing sustainability, I'm choosing density, I'm choosing walkability. I ain't gonna
I can save money that way.
I can save money that way, and then I can also spend money on different things. It's not that the money is going to spend money, it's experiential.
Yeah.
Right?
But the other side of that is even if you didn't build any housing and you were assuming a house that was already built has been here.
Sure.
Just to get that house up and running is terribly expensive. To buy, my house is 1856.
Yeah.
Anything that I touch in that house is a ton of money. It's listen, I was getting told on windows and it was over $8,000 per window, and I'm like, okay, oh yeah, no,
Fancy windows.
So no, because it has to adhere to this, and this, but we're gonna get into that with the storage.
So here's the numbers, right? So if you're talking about a house without a mortgage, these are borough people without a mortgage, that it's still costing 70% of them are still spending more than $1,000 a month on just keeping the house running.
Yeah.
That's what it costs here to keep a house running.
And that's minimum.
Right? If you talk about a house in town that is assessed at about $300,000, you're talking about $7,500 in taxes. Right? But no, but that so if you're gonna spend, that means that you're gonna be spending, right? You're spending $700 a month on taxes before you get started. Right?
And that's the other part of buying a house that young people is the pushback as well, is because it's not just the down payment of the house, it's the taxes on the house year over year over year over year. And so that eats up the
So yeah, the question of we have a lot of folks who are newer to town, we have a lot of folks who are younger. I'm telling you from what we know from looking around the place, we need housing here that covers all of those bases. We're pretty good on the single family detached houses. We've got a bunch of them. Right? We're doing okay there, but we don't have enough. You saw that before. We don't really have that many big multifamilies.
Big families are also our biggest taxpayers.
Right. The 20 more units, there's only 14% of the housing units in town are in those big complexes, right? I'm not saying we need to build 17, Prospect Hills, right? Because that doesn't make sense either. But where it's appropriate, a little density is a way to do affordability, sustainability, and, you know.
But even if you did entry level homes, that's a start, right? So it doesn't have to be an apartment or a small house, but it could be an entry level home that is a smaller home, whatever the case may be, just to get.
So let's talk about, I'm sorry,
I'm just saying.
yeah, so let's talk about condos, right? Like condos, you know, it's single men and divorcees used to be the stereotype, right? Condos are appealing for a lot of reasons. You've got community built in, you have much lower maintenance. Yeah, you're paying HOAs, but you have lower maintenance. I don't like the privatization of home services, truth be told. I'd rather not have the HOAs have so much control. And if you really want to watch, who did the whole thing? Was it someone did the whole takedown of HOAs? Was it Colbert? John Oliver. Yeah, that was watch that. But so I think that public service should have fun. But you've got community, you've got lower maintenance, you can have affordability through density, places where it makes sense. Common Line is a great little neighborhood, right? Whether you're owning or renting, right? It's a great little neighborhood. Now, you want to dig in, Joey knows some of this, like the history of how that thing got built and all the other stuff is a whole other mess.
Yes.
Right? We don't want to go down that road. We should do this the right way. But when you talk, so I'm looking at the stuff that we
Because they blame us now for that.
Yeah. I'm looking and was Lee wrong. But I look at the stuff that's been recently approved. I see that we've got a whole little neighborhood that's going to be where Liberty Village was, right? That's being built. I look at, where people are going to be living, close to each other but having their own spaces, right? There are places in town that make sense, right? Close to highway access and all the rest of it. Yeah, Joe.
So maybe switch topics a little bit from some of these questions came from my mind when we were talking about economics. When Audie first got elected to council, the demographics were very Republican. It was like who you want RTD, and I sort of seeing the borough turn more democratic. I'm just wondering what your theory would be. How did that political shift change over the course of time? Is it just, what would that have? I have no idea.
No, I could theorize, but I don't think it has to do with economics, and I don't think it has to do with. I think it just has to do with use. I think that it just, if you want, okay. During the last decade, let's go back to 2010. Let's go pre-Newt Gingrich, right? Let's go to the pre-Contract on America stuff, right? Contract with America. You had I think there was a class difference between Democrats and Republicans, wealthy and working class. I cannot say, as somebody who's, as you all know, like I'm a Democrat, but like I have a hard time saying with straight face that Democrats are giving speak to working class values right now. So like I'm not so sure about the premise of the question. I think that the borough has gotten more diverse, and I think it's gotten, but
That's that is. It's sort of been what I've experienced in theory is that I've seen many of the older folks have either passed on and moved on to another area, or more conservative. And most of the people that I think are moving in, like I would say, like is 2/3 are newer people from after 2010 or so,
or in their housing units.
Seem to be younger, seem to be more. From places that are a little bit less conservative. I'm not even sure if I would say liberal, but so they tend to be a little bit more liberal, and maybe that's the demographic, swing that has sort of come to go maybe a little bit younger.
Because look, I think it also has to do with politics have moved from being local to national, and everything's moved national. So I think if you look nationally, who Republicans are running versus who Democrats are running, and who other parties are running, I think that may be part of it too. I don't know. It's hard to say.
No, I really.
There's some other folks.
I know, sure.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna speak about the condos.
6 people in the room. Thank you.
You're here.
But yeah, I grew up in Townsend with my family, so I lived right on the edge of the borough and on South Main, also right on the edge in Raritan Township. But we bought a condo right on the edge of Raritan Township, Flemington Borough. We would have loved to live in Flemington Borough, pay our taxes here, but as young people, there was nothing to buy in our price range.
Right.
So those condos, I think, is a great idea for Flemington Borough. We're right; it's like Flemington South, so those were like the only condos around here that you could buy. And high density, like you said, like we walk into the borough all the time. You know, we would love to be paying taxes here and be borough residents, but there's just no option. So
Right.
I'm 28, so you know, like some of the younger people in town coming in, and I mean, I grew up here, but just to speak on that, I think it's lived experience.
I love it.
No, listen, I moved to Flemington when I was 20.
Yeah.
You know, and I was renting, and yeah, it's.
Can I follow up on that question? I have a question about the cost of condos now versus now. My perspective is, my husband and I got married in '96 and we bought a condo for $95,000. Not in Flemington, in New York State, Orange County, but similar, very small town. Back when we graduated from college, we probably made, I think I was offered like $17.50 an hour. And, but a man who would say that outright would have been paid $18 an hour, plus him 50 cents more per hour for health insurance. But that's another story. The point is, let's just say round numbers, average was $25,000 salary per year when my husband and I graduated from college in '93. And we bought this condo for $95,000. That same condo today would probably cost about $400,000 to buy, but the average person graduating from college today, average maybe 50 grand. Like the cost of housing has gone up 4 times, and frankly, part of me blames my own generation. Like I think I'm screwed. Like my generation, screwed the next generation.
It's the boomers.
Maybe it's okay.
I'm blaming the boomers for everything.
So my point is this: as a community, as planners, as elected officials, as residents, whatever whatever we are, and put yourself in whatever pot you want to be in. How do we make those condominiums? The idea of home ownership is still valuable to young people, even though maybe not as I get, but there's still a goal of that. How do we bring that cost of condos into more reality?
So again, Tony said, it's not a bad word. Density is not a bad word. Like the fact is you need density to to allow for the profit margin on a typical housing project is about 8%. Industry wide, for someone who's put their money at risk for a couple of years from conception through approvals through construction and have their money back, they get about most people, a good project is 8 to 10%. They're not looking to make a ton of return, but it's a decent return. So in order for somebody to make that return, you got to reduce their costs somehow. So one way to reduce costs is to let them build more on the same plot of land. So that's one is the density. The other thing is, some people say it's a regulatory issue, making it easier for stuff to happen. So I don't think it's terribly hard to do stuff in the borough. I really don't. And I'm saying this as having sat on the planning board forever. Like, we tend not to say no. We tend to ask hard questions and make projects good. And it takes some time. But the people who come with a decent project and they've got all their ducks in a row, it's fairly straightforward. It's the folks who are trying to pull it over. The ones who can have a hard time. This is my experience. Again, I don't want to speak about any particular application. But so there's that piece of it. We have had, and I think maybe this is some to what Joey was suggesting a minute ago. We have had, various kinds of enforcement over the years where it's been better or worse in terms of code, construction, and the rest of it. And maybe we need to do a better job on that. But we've got 3 electeds in the room here. it should be easier for those processes to happen, right? It should, we should be a little bit more digital, we should be a little bit faster using that stuff. But like, what we know for best practices across the industry is if you make it easier for a builder to make their normal returns on the project. So some of it's regulatory, some of it is density, some of it is building material, some of those other things. Like there's innovative material stuff that we could be doing, right? But at the same time, we don't want crap, right? You can build cheap crap, right? We as a community, we don't want crap. We don't want yeah, it's a quarter housing units were built, before World War II. We don't want the other 3/4 to look like they don't belong in a town with those old brick houses, right? So we do take this seriously. And so when we have big projects, we ought to be taking design stuff, right? But there are ways in which we can encourage, the efficiencies there that might help. But it's there. The borough is mostly built out, right? And so if we want folks to live in the borough, we want our housing in the borough, it's going to have to come through density. Like this is not Reddington where they are so far behind on their affordable housing application that they're just cramming in 3,000 houses in White House because no one else in Reddington wants it anywhere else in the township. If you're watching any of this, or the
why all of a sudden their municipalities are shoving all these houses and they don't realize that we in the borough have been monitoring this for 20 years and making sure we've been doing our due diligence. These guys have been kind of putting it off for so long. You're like, oh, now we have to catch up
now it's
because the state's making.
Yeah, and then they blame the state, and I will say that the borough's been doing their right.
From a professional
Yeah.
point of view, you might know this, it's a little bit big of a question for a small municipality, but is there any ordinance anywhere in the country that is preventing people from buying up, people who just have the monopoly money to play with it, from buying up massive amounts of housing and renting it out at extortionate rates, like prices? Is there something?
That's
Is there any way
happening a
to
lot in
prevent
hot
it?
market.
They are
Is
looking,
there any
okay, so,
way to prevent that? And
so. There are some cities that are trying to regulate this, but it is it's really hard. Because the fact is that, we live in a country that says you get to buy what you want to buy.
yeah.
You get that be a business that sells what it wants to sell, right? And so, certain towns have tried to regulate. So what you can regulate are people who are like buying houses, flipping them into Airbnbs. Like you can regulate short-term rentals, but the corporate ownership of whole apartment buildings that are based, that is really hard to regulate because, who are we to say what you get to own, right? It's a free market question, and so any laws that have been put into place to say that you must live in the thing you buy, those are thrown out. Like those are very hard, those are almost impossible to enforce. So I don't know off the top of my head of any municipality in the US who's been able to successfully deal with some of these corporate landlords who've been jacking up the prices. I mean, part of the thing is like, and a lot of the venture capitalists buying up houses and having all these, there's egregious stories of abuses and it's, I don't know a place that's regulated it terribly small, other than kind of within the consumer protection framework, but
Yeah.
Good ahead of that over a while.
Yeah, so two things. One, I think it's a Hunter County issue, so, but it's more than that. A lot of the new construction that's going up that's hyper are leasing. So young people can't even buy in if they want to on the lower side, if you will, of housing costs.
Yeah.
And that I see as a huge problem. It's even gone out to Raritan Valley across from there. They're building that huge complex. It's all leasing. Up by North Leonard, Portuguese, all leasing. Behind the Union Hotel, all leasing or rentals. So you have these high densities that are going in, but not opportunistic for young people. Second thing is, I do a lot of work on the disability front across the state of New Jersey. And we're really focusing on accessibility dwelling units and ADUs.
Yep.
In the borough, it's probably harder because of the lot size of the properties.
But we could put ADUs in.
But ADUs is a really viable way to start rezoning
Yeah.
or conversations in councils and municipalities to have that build out. And
Yeah.
open it up to people with disabilities or young people want to return to the town, but can't afford.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what's happening in the borough on that.
So ADUs, all right, so accessory, I'll give you the short version, accessory dwelling units, sometimes they're called granny flats, right? Having a second primary structure, on a single lot, which normally is not allowed, right? So think about an apartment above a garage, for those who are old enough to remember Happy Days, Fonzie, right? That's an ADU, right, living above the country. For everyone who doesn't get that reference, that's fine. A second house at the rear of a property, they are under old school single family zoning laws, they're not allowed, you're only supposed to have one principal structure. And then you can have a garage, you can have a barn, you can have a shed, but you're not allowed to have two houses on single property. We can fix that, and there are actually,
We actually added it.
we added it,
Especially during COVID, we added it into the master plan.
Yeah, so we did.
Because we were like, oh, yes.
but it is,
I'll tell you, our planning board big on ADUs, so.
it's gotta get into the ordinances.
Well, that's up to maybe some council members here that need to step up and incorporate
So
that.
we'll get there, but yeah, no, so it's absolutely a really key thing to do. So are there lots in town where it makes sense? Absolutely. Are there garages and other structures? Absolutely. Is it gonna stop? I will say the towns that have embraced ADUs out west, a lot more of it than there is in this part of the country. It is a piece, it'll not solve the whole thing. So one of the ones that we had in town that got needed variance relief, it's my rear yard neighbor, in town, was, he's got an adult son who, isn't able to live entirely independently, but he's got a little apartment in that house, right? And he lives in the front house and the son's in the back, and it's perfect. He needed to go through a variance application because it wasn't allowed for by the rules, but like, it was perfect, it's a skinny long lot, the ADU is in the back, and primary house, you wouldn't know it.
I remember that application.
You wouldn't know that the ADU is in the back from looking on the side street, but I happen to see it because it's where my pictures are, right? So it's, so there's ways to do it.
And I just wanna add, I was part of the early negotiation for one of the projects we had.
But you know, Maplewood
And the,
is big on that.
Maybe what's doing it.
Yeah,
the beginning, we talked about, homes for special needs.
Yes.
And that just happens to be a really important topic for me, so I was like, hey, let's go.
Yeah.
It's harder to do, and that went away, but we were able to get veterans housing. Which was easier to get because of where the money comes from and the amount of time. That's a challenge as well. And I don't know why the system's set up that way, that's how we're hit.
So your other question about rental, this is something that about housing that I'm trying to avoid going so far into the weeds, but there is a federal program for the low income housing tax credit, LIHTC. We love our acronyms. So low income housing tax credit's been around since '86. And what it does is if you are an uber rich investment type, if you want to avoid paying taxes, you can make an investment into a project that provides rental units to low and moderate income households. So, it's a tax credit program. I don't think we should be funding low income housing through tax credits. I think we should just be taxing people appropriately and building it, which is what we did until the moratorium on public housing that makes it past in '73, but, the Johnson has some help building there too. It's not a, so the LIHTC is the way in which overwhelming majority of low and moderate rental projects get built. It's part of the capital stack for almost every project. We don't see as much of it out in Hunterdon County because the tax credits are syndicated statewide, and most of the LIHTC money in the city of New Jersey goes to the obvious places that have greater need than Hunterdon County does. So they are going to those larger cities where they absolutely need it. There's not enough money in the LIHTC program. And where I work in Philadelphia, it is the chunk of money. And so there's this federal tax incentive that encourages rentals to be built over ownership units. There isn't a similar program to subsidize, there are programs that subsidize ownership, down payment assistance. There's EMI and a few other grant programs for low and middle income families. But they're not nearly as extensive as as LIHTC is. And so that's why we see a lot of them go for rental, because that's the federal incentive. It's economics, like they create an incentive and the market responds to the price of the incentive. Right, I mean, that was kind of Susan's getting at before, so Joe, get it.
Follow up on this question, if you could expand upon this a little more. You mentioned the Union Hotel, which is, per lease. It's just over 200 units.
Yep.
The Liberty Village is for sale, just under 100 units. The veterans housing.
The veteran
is
apartments
still
are
11 are
rentals.
rentals, but the majority, 90% of the units over there are for sale.
Yeah.
So how does that affect, like, I wanna go back to the whole census thing, and like, how does that affect our housing situation that you presented earlier?
We need more housing. I mean, like, I don't know how to say this, like, we need more
But I
housing.
mean, like, we've got two major projects in town, one is for sale, and one is for rent, did we choose the right mix?
I don't think it matters. I'm gonna say that, I think what we try to do is you find you gotta, unless we're gonna actually have the public sector build housing, which I don't think you're gonna stomach for in Hunterdon County. So if we're gonna have private developers build housing, you gotta let them pick what makes sense for the project that they're building. We can, if we use the redevelopment law, which has its pluses and minuses, as those who involved know. If you use the redevelopment, if the governing body, deems an area need a redevelopment, they have some control over some of the aspects, but you can't really tell a developer these are ownership or these are rental. It's really not allowed for you to let them build their projects, what they want. They're gonna do their market analysis. They're gonna see what the market is for renters and what the market is for ownership. If you let them build density, they'll decide if they want them to be ownership units or rental units based on the economics of their project. I don't think it matters. I think our issue in town really is there aren't enough housing units, period, or stop regardless if they're ownership or rental. The market will work itself out. The other thing that happens is the number of single family homes in town that are rented out, or duplexes that are rented out, that were originally constructed as maybe as ownership units, or maybe it's an ADU situation where you've got like grandma lives in part of it and rents out the rest of it, like that sorts itself out. I don't think we have to be as worried about, say, rental versus owner, because it's just a matter of we need housing. Now, when you talk about income restricted stuff, you talk about specifically programs that are for low mod. And so when we say low mod income, it is income, not the math ain't crazy. We look at area mean income. So it's not 74,000 for the county area we're in. Let's call it 75 to make the math simpler. I know it's not. You are considered low income if you're 50% or lower. So half of 75, right, is 37.5, right? So if your household income is less than 37.5, you are eligible for low income. Moderate is 80% of the area. So those are the federal standards for under HUD for that stuff. If you have a lot of people in your community that meet low mod, then rental ends up being more possible in those markets because there's just more people for it. So take Philadelphia, because I know the Philadelphia numbers pretty well. Philadelphia until very recently was about 2/3 owners and a third renters. It was very much an ownership town. And until about the year 2000, and then what has happened in the last 15 years, 85% of the new housing construction in the city of Philadelphia has been rentals.
Okay.
And so now it's about 50-50, right? So it is the market flipped, right? Now certain neighborhoods are still 2/3 ownership, right, or higher, but like that's, that the market works itself out based on what the capital stack looks like and the investment looks like. We need money. We just need the units. I know, we're going along. You said 20 minutes, right? So
20 times, yeah. Well, I don't know, that was some good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, folks, with the spirit of the right, Lyceum is always kind of like, all right, when I was digging around, all I could find was there was nothing on Flemington's like specific minutes or whatever, right? But I found minutes from Stockton, close enough, right? And Stockton had their own, and it was funny because they would start when I read their minutes. It was, there'd be singing in the beginning, and then they would start debating, and then have conversation. And if the debate dropped off, they just like, well, what do you want to talk about? And one of the notes was like, the Reverend talked about the wonders of the moon, or something such like that. And then in the end, there was singing, right? So the idea of closing out with music, Matt's gonna take it away from us. But what this experience was tonight, what the previous experience was, very similar. It's just feeling comfortable to talk. Right? And one of the things that inspired this for me was I was getting tired of the conversations not happening when they're supposed to be happening, in a very real sense. So, people in the Lyceum, they may have yearned for some sort of social network, but because that's a real social network, right? So I hope people kind of pause and kind of take this and say, well, this experience was pretty real, right? And I think the comfort with talking about this stuff, I'm kind of a numbers nerd. You'd be surprised, I'm a word nerd too, but I really like the story that the numbers tell, and it's very obvious, right?
I also want to say, I've known Jeff for all the time we lived here, and I've had many of these conversations leading here and there. And I really have to say, I love the way you put this together very specifically from generation to generation, because it really gives a wonderful picture of the entire town. I also want to say, secondly, is the only Baker movie here. I want to try to follow, I just want to thank them, like I give a fuck. I just want to say thank you to all of you for me my social security and Medicare.
Enjoy it. There you go. Yeah. Enjoy our days of our. Well, oh yeah. Yeah. So what? Jeff was generous enough to send me the slideshow.
You have PowerPoint, you do whatever you want with it.
Yeah,
These are public data that I put together this afternoon onto some table. There's nothing in here that y'all could have gotten yourselves. I just happen to know how to get it faster.
Yeah, no, this
But
is
it's
wonderful.
also the execution.
Right.
You get the numbers, but the execution of it is.
So I'm happy to share also, if anyone has other questions about like just the data stuff and wants to like dive in and play, Josh@gmail.com.
And I will post in a couple days. I have a Wix site called Like the Hall, which basically gives a rundown of each meeting. And I have some pictures. I will include his presentation and links to the videos. The Zoom stopped, but it did record to the cloud. It just, for whatever reason, did that. I got most of what you were saying in the second clip. But anyway, next month. All right. So August 21st, we are going to be, we're shifting locations again. So we're going to be at Stengel Factory. And this is going to be a little interesting. I didn't tell you too much about it, but this is going to be a lecture in the tour. And the person giving this lecture is going to talk about public spaces, shared spaces, why, where we gather matters. And Stengel has become our arts and culture district, officially, okay? And it's really a hub for, art and entertainment, and, we have the sip and strolls, we have the farmers market. I mean, this place is become something really unique and fun and interesting. And that's going to be the centerpiece in August. So if you can make it, that'd be awesome. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. It's great. I know it's Thursday night. It's a weird night to come out for a weirdly named thing, but I really appreciate it. And that's it. We've got some snacks, some staples, some chips, some popcorn, some waters.
I brought some little Egypt, Yara's,
Like
desserts in a can.
yeah.
They're
So
good.
and they're all labeled too, and they look
Yeah,
very
they're all
interesting.
Yeah, all the flavors.
It might explode a little bit.
Oh, did they?
I had a miss.
Oh, no.
I was young.
Sorry.
All right, well, you know what? Thanks again, and thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much, and Matt, you can serenade us into the.
God, that's so, I was so excited, I needed all of that. It's a push. Thank you. I was like, so it gives me fun. I mean, before.
I'm so glad.
I'm happy to have it. I wanted to straight. Everything up here, same job. I know, but. I know. Oh. Oh. That's right, yeah. I don't think so. Yeah. And if you're walking along,
Yeah, it's actually owned by Jen Alliance.
Are you guys about?
That's not the word, but that's. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I was down by their family.
Yeah. Or there. And I'm just very. Why I'm not probably after my time was there, right there. Right, and go up to the building, right, but that's like you couldn't see it when you were back in the building. I think, like, I read the fight, meeting. And we're good on that.
All right. Hey, I get it. I could I know.
I do, like, in the interesting, to make it line heavier and. How, I'm like, everything happy for your roof for, like, for. Oh, it has been. And very top like the. Same thing, and now back. And we start that. I'll walk you there. Looking back from the people, and are you interested in having students possibly?
Yes.
Because I think research seminar,
Yeah.
there might be a.
Yeah. All four do I said.
Yeah.
Young.
I think Demetrius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Now look, it's gonna be
Yeah.
DIY.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, based on project vision for us. And then I think that's what kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And then. Yeah, whatever. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, I